Sports Professor Rick Horrow, keeping score beyond the box score in the boardroom. You know, you call this different names, but we've interviewed commissioners and we've interviewed team owners and agents and players, and that's all significant in their own way. They all stuck to what they needed to do. They were very successful. I am pleased and honored. I've been excited about this interview for a while since my executive vice president, Carlos Swadek, set this up for me. And we have somebody who had a 10-year career as a place kicker, third most accurate kicker in NFL history with the Chargers, Pro Bowl, Comeback Player of the Year, Whizzer White Award, Chargers Hall of Fame. Broke my damn heart as a Dolphin fan a number of times, but he did miss a couple, but he made many, many more, and that's maybe 5% of what his life is all about. Rolf Benirschke, how's that for a beginning of an introduction?
Well, Rick, thanks for having me on. That's only a part of my life. I was raised in a medical family. My dad was a medical school professor at Dartmouth, and then where I grew up, and was a hockey player and skier and tennis player. And then he moved us to San Diego without asking us kids, because he was invited to join this really turned-on research department at UCSD, a fledgling medical school. And that changed my life in every way. And I'm still trying to earn his respect after having spent 10 years in the league. When are you going to do something? I've had to carry that with me, but it's funny how it works out.
Well, but the bottom line is that you were probably the smartest guy in the room in most places other than at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. And it is interesting as you move west, because you have much more of a perspective than just a kicker. And clearly that is a piece of this that is a relatively small piece. So let's lead with the bigger piece. Obviously, you were very sick for a very long period of time and inspired one of the great comebacks. You created great comebacks. You wrote Alive and Kicking. Tell us a little about the biggest valley in your life and how you turned it into a peak.
Yeah, so I was one of those reluctant athletes. We were sort of teasing, but I did grow up in this academic medical family and ended up going to Davis, UC Davis, to study zoology, having turned down scholarship opportunities to kick at really major institutions. When I went to my dad and said, they want me to go to USC to kick, and Dad was an immigrant and very involved in academics. And, that's not why I go to college. And, of course, I didn't know if I was really good or not. I just played my senior year in high school. And so I chose Davis, didn't sign up to play football. And funny story, I get called a week into my classes, and it was the head football coach there, and he goes, I was just berated by the coach at SC suggesting I'm paying players to come to Davis. What are you doing up there? And, of course, the coach at Davis at the time, Jim Soker, who was legendary, became an extraordinary coach, set an NCAA record 20 straight conference championships, but was relatively new at the time, said, of course we don't, pay players because we don't even give scholarships. But who are you talking about? And the coach at SC, well, we recruited this kicker, and he chose Davis over SC. Surely you must be doing something illegal. And Jim Soker, smart guy, said, well, what's his name? And got my name and tracked me down and actually talked me into playing football and really changed my life in every way. But where my life became significant, I think, in the question you're asking, is that I ended up with the Chargers, and in my second season was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, originally Crohn's disease, and several surgeries later, ulcerative colitis. But it was right at the beginning of my second season. This is 1978, and as you know, football is a violent sport, and I'm a kicker, so hardly a football player. And for all intents and purposes, I had, a stomach ache with diarrhea, and guys around me are tearing knees and shoulders and getting concussed. And so I kind of kept my head down and did the best I could to get through the season. But by the last month of the season, I was literally playing the game on Sunday. Sunday night, they would take me to a hospital, put a central IV line in my neck. I'd kind of be there all week, couldn't eat anything. They'd pull it out. I'd go to the team meeting on Saturday night, play the game on Sunday, and then resume that process again Sunday night at the hospital. So it was a brutal time. We didn't know much about inflammatory bowel disease. The treatments were not very good. We finished the season. Our team was just getting good, and as you know, there's only one kicker. You're either starting or unemployed, and I didn't want to be unemployed. I loved what I was doing. Our team was good. There was an extraordinary connection with the community. This was when Don Coryell was our head coach, and Dan Fouts was the quarterback, and we had players like Kellen Winslow and Charlie Joyner and Chuck Muncie, and we're kind of rewriting offensive playbooks and scoring sheets. And as a kicker, I got a lot of chances to participate, so I loved it. Tried to come back in my third season and collapsed on a team flight on the way home. My colon had started to perforate. They landed the plane. I had an emergency surgery, and there were complications. I had a second surgery 6 days later. I'm now 65 pounds below my weight, and in the same hospital where my dad is working, they're basically coming to him after the surgery saying, we're not sure your son's going to survive the night. I was septic. I woke up with 2 ostomy bags on my side and would spend almost 6 weeks in intensive care unit, and just extraordinarily lucky. I got great medical care there to live. And then I woke up and say, why did I live? I think I would have preferred to die, because in my mind, there was no reason to live. I assumed because of the condition I was in with these ostomy appliances on my side, I couldn't play the sports I loved. I was a tennis player and a skier and a hockey player and a scuba diver. I think I'll never do that. I'm making my living as a professional football player. Nobody's ever played with an ostomy. I'm sure I'm never doing that. And I was single at the time, 24. And I like girls, and I'm going, I'm sure never doing that again. Why didn't I just die? And I went through a really difficult time and was extraordinarily lucky to discover that all those fears actually didn't happen. I could end up playing all those things, return to play 7 more years, and 4 of those with ostomy bags. I would have subsequent surgeries to get rid of them. And I'm now married just to a stunning gal. We've been married for 28 years and love my life. So I'm an extraordinarily lucky guy, Rick.
It's an incredible story, but for you beating the Dolphins in, 84? That's an entirely different issue that we can talk about some other time. I will tell you, without too much levity in it, you make the rest of listening to athletes and how they complain, some about dollars, some about other things. The world that you had to survive was just absolutely incredible. So we'll get back to football in a few minutes. So off of that, and once you realized that you had a 10-year career and you had a platform and a pulpit, tell me about Legacy Health Strategies, what it is, how you founded it, and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the first thing, I had an agent back then named Lee Steinberg, who was really a revolutionary guy who was an idealist, and I was a brand new client of his, and he was brand new in the business, and we were both pretty idealistic, but he made me appreciate that I had a platform now as an athlete, and my passion was wildlife. I had spent a summer living in South Africa after my senior year in high school. I was involved where they saved the white rhino on rhino capture, darting white rhinos. I mean, it's just right out of the movies, really. And in the off seasons in college, I worked at the San Diego Zoo in the research department there. And even when I was playing football, I was involved with the zoo. In fact, created a program called Kicks for Critters, where for every field goal I kicked, I donated to the research center at the zoo and raised awareness of endangered species and got the community to do it. And way back then, we raised $1.5 million during my career and really made the community much more aware of endangered species. But where my life changed was when I was able to return to play in the National Football League. A lot was written about the comeback of this player, and wherever I would appear, this is 1980 now, pre-internet, oftentimes, especially the first couple of years back, the sports writer would write in the area where we were going to play, Denver, Dallas, Seattle, about what I had gone through. And wherever that letter appeared, or that article appeared, patients or family members of patients would read it, and I would come back to the locker room the next week, and there'd be 50 letters in my locker. Rolf Benirschke, usually misspelled, San Diego Chargers, San Diego, California, and the letters would almost all be the same. Dear Rolf, how can you play football with an ostomy? I'm trying to. And it was like a fill in the blank. Go to school. Mm-hmm. Go to work. Be a dad. And I was the beneficiary of a brand new technology, brand new company. And so I reached out to them and said, we need to do something. I'm getting all these letters. Nobody's talking about it. It's the quintessential closet illness. And so created for them a program called Great Comebacks, which was a way for patients to share their stories about what they were doing after their ostomy surgery. And we discovered that this restrictive lifestyle that we all thought we would live in when you're lying there in the hospital bed saying, I'd rather die than live with a bag, just wasn't true. I mean, we found police officers that returned to the force, firefighters, triathletes. We have a guy that climbed Mount Everest with an ileostomy bag. The first call I get, almost two weeks after launching the program, was from a nurse in Denver. She goes, I don't really like you. I'm a Broncos fan, but I have a professional golfer in my hospital bed who says he would rather die than live with a bag. Can you call him? And I said, of course, who is it? And it was Al Geiberger. So that was the beginning. We literally have connected with thousands of ostomy patients and provided them hope and inspiration that this was not the end of their life, but really a second chance at their life. And we all live it a little differently and with a little more gratitude having gone through this.
Well, very clearly you have everybody talks about role models and athletes as role models. What's your reaction from a emotional perspective, but this is a business show, to the Charles Barkleys of the world who claim that an athlete's not a role model and it's up to each individual to figure it out themselves, or stated more positively, what's your view of the obligation of a professional athlete who has played? Should he give back? Does he have to give back? What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I have pretty strong opinions about it. I think by default we are. I think we're in the news. We get all the privileges of the coverage that goes on. And so I think you abdicate your responsibility if you say, I don't have to be a role model. I think we clearly recognize that what we say and do is reported. And so with that comes an obligation and a responsibility to use that wisely. Now, I can't speak for everybody else. I just think we have an extraordinary opportunity to play a sport for that we love and get paid for it, and the opportunity to do real good with it. And why wouldn't you? With the intentionality that you can do extraordinary good that will change your life. I mean, not only do you do good for others, but you get so much back. I mean, it is humbling for me to hear from a patient who's really struggling and to be able to reach out, write them a letter, call them, send them one of the books that I've written, and then hear from them 6 months later and say, you fundamentally changed my life. And you go, oh my gosh, that is humbling stuff. And then to get to meet them. I mean, I got to tell you one quick story, Rick, because this just gives me my hair stand up. I got a call once from an Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot, a 41-year-old guy who loved what he does, served 3 times overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq, and was so qualified he was a teacher of how to fly these Black Hawk helicopters. Well, he writes me and says, I went through this difficult time. I had ulcerative colitis, got working worse and worse, began to have accidents in my flight suit. Can you help me? And so I reached out and I said, absolutely. And he tells me the rest of the story. He goes, I had to go to the physician, the military physician. They said, you need surgery. You're going to end up with an ileostomy bag. And the regulations say we have to, waive you out of the military, discharge you, honorary discharge. And he goes to the guy, I knew you would say that, but would you please read one of these books? And it was one of our books, Great Comebacks from Ostomy Surgery. So the guy reads it, invites the pilot back in a week later and says, if these guys can do all these things, play professional golf, play professional football, do triathlons, go back to the firefighting force, President Bush's youngest brother has an ostomy, why can't you fly Blackhawks again? And he goes, well, I can. So the military examiner says, well, come back after you recover from your surgery. The guy comes back. They put him through all his physical tests, and the physician waves him back into the military, and he resumes his career. And a year later, he sends me a flag from Afghanistan flown over his camp on one of his Black Hawk helicopters to thank me for what I had done. And it's just not me, but it's what we had done with our program. And I'm with him, a friend of his today, called me out of the blue from Saudi Arabia. He's a contractor now in Saudi Arabia. I mean, it gave this guy his life back. And, I hear that several times a week. I mean, that's heady stuff to be able to do that.
Yeah. And also it's not just being in a position to do good, but it's actually doing good, and you're there, and you've done it. And it kind of leads me to my almost final question, and we could do this for hours, and it's you are an inspiration. What's it like? You live in Del Mar, obviously, and you're going to see the team pack up the moving vans and go up the coast. And we don't have to get into did the Spanos family do all they could to do a stadium in L.A. in Mission Valley in San Diego. That's for another show. But what is it? What is the team? What did the team mean to San Diego? How do you feel about, let's say, from a business, from an emotional perspective, the team packing up and moving to L.A.?
Well, it's a question with a lot of tentacles, but I'll tell you. First of all, I'm a hugely biased fan because I played for the team. They changed my life. They gave me extraordinary opportunities, and I watched this city love this team unconditionally. This was so my feeling about it in general is that the owners think they own the team, but the community believes they own the team, and that the physical owners are really just stewards. And so when a team moves, the fans feel just incredibly violated, and that's the case here. The impact that's not measured is all of the things that happen when a community gets touched by a team. The players that are going out and speaking at schools and igniting in a young kid the vision that he might someday be able to do this. The connection a father makes with a son or daughter, bringing them to a game for the first time and establishing a lifelong memory that gets built on as those teams continue to stay there and those kids grow and continue to connect with the team. And then there's the philanthropic aspect. So when I went through my illness, there was a spontaneous response to replace the blood that I used. I needed 80 units of blood, and a secretary at the Chargers saw that, had volunteered once in her life at the blood bank, and so called the radio station that covered our team and said, we need to replace the blood. Radio station in 2 days sent out a little, on-air blurb, and 1,000 people showed up, waited 4 hours to give blood. And then the Chargers and the blood bank got together and for 38 years have held the Chargers blood drive. And annually, it's the largest collection of blood in the country. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records. And it comes the week before Thanksgiving at a time when the blood bank is critically in need of donations. People typically don't donate as the holidays come about, and a lot of elective surgeries are initiated then. So this community connection with the city and the team and the resultant benefactor, the blood bank, and then we actually did the numbers. It's 2 Qualcomm stadiums full of people that have received blood in San Diego from the blood drive. I mean, that's an enormous impact that you really can't measure. But now that goes away, and there are dozens and dozens of those kinds of outreaches that are going to leave the city.
And it's a perspective that you have so many other perspectives, but that one seems to be pretty darn compelling. We just have a minute, and it's a question that I need to ask given where we are with the NFL today. We had a kicker who, Chris Boswell of the Steelers, single-handedly basically win a game with 6 field goals, the most ever in postseason play just recently. And you've had kickers last year miss a 20-yarder in a playoff game against Seattle, albeit with the elements. Obviously, the bigger spotlight on playoff kickers, but your position is unlike any other in the league as far as, or sports, as far as sudden victory and sudden defeat. I won't say sudden death, but give us your mental outlook or your overall perspective on what it was like to be a kicker in the National Football League.
Yeah, it's a great question. The kickers are so good today, and the pressure's extraordinary. And what we saw this weekend was just an amazing display of kickers. Mason Crosby was just so clutch. Let me get one thing off my chest, Rick. I think it is wrong to have a coach stand next to the referee on the sideline and half a second before the snapper snaps and call timeout, knowing the ball is going to be snapped, the kicker's going to kick it, and it's going to force them to re-kick. I just think that's dirty. I think they should change that.
Why didn't they ever do that? They never even thought about doing that in your day, did they?
Well, they would ice us, and none of us mind being iced, but you shouldn't allow the guy to kick it. You can't sit there and because you know what's coming. This is a game they play. I just think that's wrong. Anyway, that's my 2 cents there. I think every position clearly there's a lot of pressure, quarterbacks and receivers. But I think the thing about kickers, it's it's plus or minus. It's good or not. It's win or lose, and everybody knows it. And and you carry that. I think, unfortunately, there are names that I don't want to necessarily name whose careers are tied to misses that is unfair for them. And I go back to Billy Buckner booting the ball in the Boston Red Sox game. As good as he was for 16 or 17 years, that's what you remember him for. And unfortunately, that's the risk that comes with the position. But you get a chance to impact the outcome of the game. How cool is that? When you get called on, you get a chance to bail out your teammates. And, man, that is awesome. So I think from a psychological point of view, you have to go in there, and I think we all work hard at it, to look at the upside and deal with the downside when it happens. But it's an opportunity, and you got to enjoy the moment.
Speaking of kickers who have one miss on their legacy, we won't mention names, but the last kicker who was a world-class skier is now in the Hall of Fame as well. Kicked in the middle of the country, kicked in Missouri. When are you in the Hall of Fame?
No, I'm not a Hall of Fame guy. I'm just grateful I got to play here at a time when I got to play. I got to play with extraordinary guys, great teammates, wonderful coach who redefined offensive football, and Coach Coryell and Dan Fouts just kind of rewriting the record books, and in a community that loved its team. And so I was going to be here the rest of my life. When my career was over, I was I could have gone and played other places and decided, no, I wanted to stop right now and get on with my life. And out of that came Legacy Health Strategies and the chance to build patient support programs for medical device and pharmaceutical companies and engage closely with the patients who go on these products and help them get the life back that I had mine returned to. And so it's very, very rewarding for me.
Well, a journalist isn't supposed to talk about how the interview went twice as long as it should have, but I will tell you I am fundamentally honored. And I wish two things. One is that the legacy the Chargers leave allows some give back on a perpetual basis in San Diego. And second, even more important, that Rolf Benirschke seems to be in the fabric of Southern California and in life for as long as we can remember and continue in the future. Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard. Be back in a couple of minutes.